There we go.
What about if you take your case off? Haha, you followed my advice. Yeah! Does it work?
Yes.
See, I'm a genius. Stop the press, people. I'm a genius. Hi guys, and welcome to Bilingual Bookworm France edition, apparently. I am in my house in France currently, coming to you with some more recent reads. But first I should say, Happy New Year, one and all. It is now 2017, which to me is a really good thing, hopefully, because I don't think anything can get worse than 2016, even though we were having a debate the other day about how 2017 sounds like a worse number than 2016. So I'm hoping that we're not on a steep decline into the end of the world. I think it will be a better year, and I hope you guys all had a really lovely Christmas celebration. If you haven't seen, I let you into a little bit of what Christmas looks like for me and what my journey to France looked like, and also showed you a little book haul of the books I got for Christmas. So that was my previous video, which I will put here. It's a bit early to be drinking alcohol right now. It's only about 3:30 p.m. in France. So we have some chocolate milk here, and without further ado, I think we can get into some of the books I've been reading in December and drink some milk. I'm gonna have like whiskers. So December was a really good reading month for me. Despite being really busy with Christmas preparations, I managed to get a lot of reading in. I started with a couple of audiobooks, one of which was a carryover from last month. Before starting BookTube, I didn't really listen to audiobooks, and I've started recently partly because it's an easy way to get some more reading in, because I can listen to books as I do other things or as I'm driving, etc. So that's been an interesting thing to discover. I do really like audiobooks, especially when they're biographies or memoirs, when they're read by the author. One thing that I've discovered though is that my concentration listening to an audiobook is much less good than it would be reading an actual book, and I think that's because I do allow myself to do other things while I'm listening, and I feel like that means that I don't necessarily give it my complete attention. So I kind of have to just figure out what my flow is with audiobooks and whether it's going to work out for me, whether I want to keep trying, or whether it's just not a format that I really enjoy or that I feel does justice to the books. What's wrong? What am I doing? So with that being said, I listened to 2 audiobooks this month. The first one was a nice and short one, which was Lauren Graham's new book called Talking as Fast as I Can, From Gilmore Girls to Gilmore Girls and Everything in Between, which is such a cute title. I feel like I mainly listened to this because I had a massive Gilmore Girls hangover after the revival, and I felt like I needed all the Gilmore Girls that I could get in my life after that was over. By the way, should we talk about Gilmore Girls more than we have? Do you guys want a video about that? Are we Gilmore Girls fans here in the Bilingual Bookworm family? Because I would love to do a TV review thing. I did say that I was going to talk more about TV, and I haven't done that, so maybe I should do that. Anyway, let me know. So we listened to this, and it's a tiny little book. It's like 2 hours, which is really, really short for an audiobook. And it was really fun. It's basically a collection of essays by Lauren Graham, which is mainly about her life as an actress and just in general, her loves, and actually quite a lot about her life in Hollywood as a woman and what that represents, both when she started on Broadway 20 odd years ago and how it's changed now in 2016 or 2017. I thought it was a really lovely book, especially if you like Lauren Graham and if you like her voice. She read it and she has a very particular way of speaking and telling stories, and you really felt that that was in her voice and that it was natural. It was really funny. I really love her sense of humor, and you really realize that the character of Lorelai that she plays in Gilmore Girls is very much her, and she identifies a lot with that character, and there's a reason for that. It's a very quietly feminist book. She definitely attributes a lot of importance to breaking a whole bunch of glass ceilings that are still present in Hollywood and that have been present for a long time. And there's a lot of discussion of that. There's also a lot of talk about Parenthood, which was the other major show that she was in, which is one of my all-time favorite TV shows. So I enjoyed that. I did kind of wish there had been a little more discussion of behind the scenes stuff of Gilmore Girls, just because, you know, coming from someone who works in the creative industry, I really like those sort of set stories that are a little bit more specific than the ones you might have already heard, you know, on the Ellen show or someplace like that. I wouldn't say that it's a particularly well written book, and I wouldn't be reading her fiction book that came out a few years ago. I think it was called Someday, Someday Maybe. I'm not the hugest fan of her writing style, and I think what did salvage it was the fact that she was reading it, and so I'm really glad that I listened to it on audiobook. So yeah, if you're a fan of Gilmore Girls and if you're a fan of Lauren, then I would definitely recommend it as a quick read. If not, then probably don't pick it up. It was good. I haven't been reading a lot of nonfiction in the past couple of months, so it was good to start again with the nonfiction. But yeah, not the greatest, just really fun if you need a little more of a Gilmore Girls fix. The second audiobook was something that I absolutely loved, which was a carryover, as I said, from November, and that is My Name is Leon by Kit de Waal. This is Kit de Waal's debut novel, and really I do think that she is going to have a lot to bring to the table in the coming years. It tells the story of a little boy called Leon. The story is told from his perspective, and the book opens with the birth of his little brother Jake. Jake is white and he is black, and it becomes immediately clear that their mother is not in the best of mental health. Instead of cradling the baby she's just given birth to, she goes straight out for a cigarette, and Leon is left to look after his little brother. As the story continues, the two children are put into foster care because their mother isn't able to look after them, and soon enough Jake gets adopted by another family, and Leon is left with his original foster mother, Maureen. And suddenly Leon is left without his little brother to care for, this little boy that he's been fighting for, that he's been loving, that he's been kind of, I guess, finding himself through. And it is his story after he loses his brother, I guess, to adoption, and he kind of has to fend for himself and figure out his place in the world and how his childhood might look, whether he'll get adopted or not. There's quite a lot of discussion indirectly about why it is that Jake might have been adopted and not Leon, but it becomes clear that it is an issue of skin color. And one of the masterful things about this novel is the portrayal of the adult characters through the lens of a child. That's very difficult to do well, I think, and child narrators are in general very difficult to do well. It reminded me also of two books that I really liked, What Maisie Knew and The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, who also have just incredibly endearing, touching child narrators, and child narrators who grow throughout the novel to understand things that they didn't at the beginning. I think what's difficult about writing a child narrator effectively is that there's a line between staying true to the child's voice, so being naive about certain things and learning at the rate that a child would, and also making sure that an adult reader will understand certain things that the child doesn't, and that is something Kit de Waal is very good at. There are things that you realize as a reader that Leon is definitely not realizing. There are discussions of race, discussions of the foster care system in the 1980s. I don't think I said that it was set in the 1980s, but it is. It's a 1980s England. The foster care system still has a lot of problems today, but it definitely had a lot more then, and it's just a really interesting presentation of some heavy subjects through that lens, and I feel like she manages to humanize her adult characters just as much as her child ones, and you just I don't know, you fall in love with this little boy's voice, and it's such a touching tale that's really sad and really hard to read sometimes. I listened to it read by Lenny Henry, who I think was the perfect narrator for this. He has a great voice and also a great Jamaican accent when appropriate. And I would recommend it on audiobook just because I feel like he makes the characters come to life. And since they already do so much on the page, I think it's just the perfect medium for this book. So big congratulations to Kit de Waal for really harking me back to my childhood and also giving me the feeling of having fallen in love with a character, which always seems to come back to the fact that I just love characters that are so three-dimensional that you feel like you've just spent a whole lot of time with them when you close the book. I don't think I'm going to be forgetting Leon in a hurry. The next book I read in December was another debut novel by Rifka Brunt called Tell the Wolves I'm Home. I hauled this back in September. It's got a really beautiful cover. And this book was an interesting one. It tells of 14-year-old June Elbus. It's actually also set in the 1980s, but this time in New York. Her best friend in the world, the most important person to her, is her beloved Uncle Finn, who at the beginning of the book dies of an AIDS-related illness. He has just finished painting a picture of June and her sister Greta, which later becomes very important in the book. And at his funeral, a strange man that June has never seen makes himself known to her and expresses a desire to have a relationship with her and understand her better and get to know her. Because she knows that her family doesn't approve of him for some reason, she kind of starts a relationship, not romantic, just a friendship with him, secretively going to meet him in certain places and finding out more about her uncle and as a result more about her mother, whose brother is the one who died. It's just a beautiful book. It's funny because when I started it, I wasn't sure I was going to like it. It kind of sat in the weird space between YA and adult literature for me, but I soon realized after about, I would say, under 100 pages, that the reason for that is because, much like Kit de Waal, Rifka Brunt is really great at writing the child narrator, and actually it's very much an adult novel. It's just that June's voice is so singular and so detailed in a way. Her 14-year-old mind is so well crafted that you kind of fall into that and become, I guess, a 14-year-old that is discovering the world without your best friend, the world of grief, that is understanding the AIDS crisis that was happening in America in the 1980s, that is discovering the role of politics in that, the role of Reagan in that, and that is discovering also a whole bunch of family secrets that you were previously unaware of. I think it's a rich exploration of the art world. Her Uncle Finn was an artist. You get a lot of that. He was very famous and very well revered. Obviously, AIDS was something that people didn't speak about, that was surrounded by clouds of misunderstanding and judgment, and you get a lot of that in the novel, and it reminds you of both of how far we've come when it comes to talking about HIV and AIDS, and also how far we still have yet to go, which I think is important and always relevant. Recently was World AIDS Day, and I think that the conversation should really never stop. It's an illness that is full of loss and full of fear, and I think that even in the 2000s, it's worth harking back to the 1980s and reminding ourselves how far science has come since then and how far that's allowed our understanding of the people living with HIV and AIDS to come too. There's a really striking scene in this book that I will remember, I think, for a long time, where June's sister is using her uncle's hand soap before he dies, and her mother gets incredibly scared and starts shouting very loudly at her for using his hand soap because she thinks that that might allow for the transmission of the illness. And I just think that that's so symbolic of a deep-rooted misunderstanding that was very public at that time and that ran through the vein of society. And what better than to show that through the eyes of a child who is just coming of age. And I think I've seen this novel described so much as a coming of age novel, and I think that's to belittle it, in my opinion. It's so much more than a coming of age novel for me. It's also a societal comment and an incredible portrayal of human relationships. The depth of all these characters, you don't feel like any of the side characters are kind of left by the wayside and not personalized. You really have so much motivation running through every one of these characters, and you grow to have such an understanding of why everyone is behaving the way they are. And even though it's written in first person from June's point of view, and you might feel at first that you get mostly her perspective, you really feel that you grow to understand all these characters by the end. The ending is very sad, as is the whole book. I think you should probably expect to cry. I did, which isn't very common anymore. I don't really openly cry at books anymore, but this one made me cry. Yeah, I don't think that I would have picked it up unless the cover had stood out to me, and it really did. So they say don't judge a book by its cover, but I guess just for this once, it served me well. I'm really excited to see what Carol Rifka Brunt comes out with, and I would love also to read more books about the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. I think that I need to read up better on that, and I would love to know what else is in the literary canon surrounding that. So if you have any recommendations, I would love them. But in the meantime, if you want a book where, again, the characters jump off the page, there's so much psychology surrounding them all, and it's just really a really good yarn and very close and well knit, as I like to say. So please pick it up and let me know what you think. I know that some people have said to me already that they absolutely loved it, so I would really be intrigued to know what you think.
Certainly in Africa, I think in some tribes they call them griots, but the person would stand in the corner and everybody would gather around and they would tell stories of past hunts and past weather systems and things like that, and they'd be able to look at you and tell 4 generations ago your great grandfather did this, and tell a legendary story about some hunt that happened all those generations ago, and you'd be a kid going, how does he remember all that? But it was his job to remember it. And what's great is this is incarnated in the now, in people like you, who can have this story that is so beautiful and so touching and so moving, and that can relate something that happened and make it come alive on the page. And I think books will always be here, because not everything, some things are good to be enjoyed like that, but the joy of sitting on a train or in bed or in a park and turning a page, I hope will never go away.
No, I don't think it will.
Because I think books rock. I think libraries rock for that reason too.
Yeah.
Because you can go and sit and read and be quiet and get lost in a story.